Hi there, and welcome along to episode 89 of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the totally free independent Rangers podcast made by the fans, for the fans, and as always, the content is absolutely free. Thank you for joining us here Sunday night. As always, it's not just the podcast that's free, but we've also got all the articles, all the discussions that are going on over the website at www.gersnet.co.uk. Please do head over, take a look if you've not been there before, where you can also find myself and tonight's two guests on the friendly discussion forum as well. As a wee reminder, if you're not joining us live this evening, the podcast is, as always, available for download or for stream after the live broadcast. And you can download that on iTunes, Acast, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and even on Spotify now. But if you are joining us live here on Sunday evening, then thank you very much for giving up your time today. If you want to leave us a comment or a question on YouTube, then please do, and we'll get to as many of those as we can. As always, we've got two guests. My name's Ross Bennett, and I'll be your host for the evening, and joining me we've got two of the Gersnet finest. First up we have part-time host, part-time guest and full-time friend David Wren. David, how are you doing this evening? That
was a lovely introduction, Ross, thank you. I'm okay. I had a few too many beers last night on another Zoom call with my mate, so just nursing that hangover today, but generally okay. Getting used to this lockdown malarkey. So yeah, no complaints my end.
So the last time we spoke, David, was probably about a month ago, and you said that Dundee was actually a fine place to be enjoying a lockdown. Has your opinion changed over the last few weeks?
I don't really know. It doesn't feel like I'm anywhere now. It just feels like my home is the only place I'm ever going to be. So yeah, I mean Dundee's okay. It's been fine. You just feel like you're going on your daily exercise. You're going to all the same places because you just keep running into the same areas. But it's okay. I don't think there's anywhere better to be at the moment. I think everyone's in the same boat.
Aye, absolutely. Also joining us this evening is Ian Duff. Ian, I think it's been a hell of a long time since you and I were last on a show together. Probably no enough time to do a full proper catch up. How have you been finding lockdown and the pandemic? How's it all treating you?
Just like everybody else, really. It's just really weird, isn't it? It's just totally surreal when you stop and think about it and what's actually going on. You just sort of think, what is this all about? What is this all about? Really weird. But yes, get on. Struggling by as everyone is.
Did you decide to partake in the German football offering that's returned this weekend?
I did. That was a weird one as well. It was. I mean, once the game started, you just kind of. I felt felt kind of normal, really. I mean, the only distraction was, I think they would be better off completely muting the stadium sound altogether, because that's the only thing that sort of put me off. The empty stands were one thing, but it was just the sort of shouting from the sidelines seemed to put you off a bit. But no, it was quite enjoyable, actually. I thought for a Saturday afternoon, I quite enjoyed it. Good to see it back.
It's nice to see it back. You see, I think I'm the opposite to you, is that I quite like the fact that I can hear the players shouting at each other, and I'm just waiting for a sort of an off-the-ball incident that then escalates into a proper rammy, and you can hear everyone call each other a shite bag in German on the pitch.
Well, that would be quite good, actually. Yeah.
I've not decided who I'm supporting yet, but I saw that Greuther Fürth were playing Hamburg today, and they were wearing green and white hoops, so I know who I'm avoiding. Listen, gents, the way that the shows have worked over the past few weeks is that obviously we've discussed a hell of a lot of the SPFL, of Celtic's, being handed the title, it seems, on a silver platter, and the kind of furore that's befallen Scottish football over the past 6 weeks or so. Obviously, over the past week, there's been the EGM at the SPFL, the vote on the independent investigation. There's still plenty of stuff to cover around that whole topic. But today, thankfully, we've had some pro-Rangers good news as well, which is the announcement of the Castore kit deal. So I think it would only be fair that we start there and try and get some positivity back into the Rangers world. So what I'm going to do, first of all, Ian, I'll come to you. Obviously, Rangers, it was probably the second best kept secret in football. The best kept secret in football is obviously over the other end of the city. But the second best kept secret in football was that Castore were going to be producing Rangers new kits. And finally, that was announced today at 9 o'clock on Twitter, although it was kind of pre-announced to a lot of Rangers fans' email inboxes about an hour and a half before. it's the first venture into football for Castore, although they've kind of had offerings in general gym wear and sportswear before. Would you be happy with a Castore, or would you have preferred a more established name, a Nike or a Reebok or someone like that?
Well, I don't have any particular urge that we have to have, an established brand. I think, I know people like to see, that they want to be the same as the big clubs, and they think that if you don't have that, then it's, somehow you're a lesser player. But I mean, what's important really, I think, is the deal and how that benefits Rangers. And if that's, I've always said, I don't care who the manufacturer is, as long as it's a good deal for the club. So on the face of it, this one sounds like it's a good deal for the club, and therefore it's going to be good. I mean, I suppose down the line we've got to, there's always going to be potential issues, so we just need to hope that that they can live up to their side of the bargain, because I'm sure the Rangers fans will, do their part. They'll be desperate to buy the products, and it's up to Castore to be able to deliver it. So I'm hoping that Rangers have got the guarantees in place that they will be able to fulfil their end of the bargain.
You see, you kind of reference potential hiccups down the road, and whether that's in the form of production, supply and demand, or in the form of a fat Cockney bloke who's trying to sell a Geordie football team at the moment. We'll kind of get onto that in a moment. David, it seems to me that this deal has been kind of quite universally accepted by most Rangers fans, who are happy to see us, we're obviously broken free from Hummel and the headache that's caused us over the past 9 months or so. But there's still a kind of fairly vocal minority who are crying out for a more recognised brand. Can you kind of understand that mentality from a section of the fans?
I'm still actually trying to work out how one of the first sports manufacturers that came to your mind was Reebok. That seems like a really niche mainstream sports manufacturer, but I sort of understand it to a point, but a lot of we've discussed it in the show quite a lot, and I think, Colin certainly has brought it up a few times as well. I understand it to an extent, but I think reading what I have done today, about Castore and the plans they've got, I'm pretty positive about it. I think, it is important that, the badge is more important than the person that manufactures the strip, I think. But certainly, money-wise, it seems like a good deal. And, I said on the last show about this, but the fact that Andy Murray's one of the someone that wears Castore, that to me is a real positive, because he's not, he's not silly, and he's also an investor in this company, which tells me, Andy Murray's got a lot of good investments, and seems to be good with his money and what he does with it. And if he's investing in this company and he believes in it so much, and he's also wearing it, as one of the most recognisable sports stars in the UK, that's a green light for me. One of the things that did strike me, that I read an interview on the Athletic before we came on, and one of the things that struck me about what the guy said was, they will only be produced certainly next season for Rangers, which means, they'll be paying special attention to exactly what they're producing for the club. So that's good. And he also made a point about, companies like Nike and Adidas, and how they tailor towards, the big clubs like Real Madrid, Barcelona, and a lot of the smaller clubs are forgotten about, or certainly not, the ones below the big Galactical clubs are sometimes forgotten about. And I think, that is the case. And I don't always think there's that, attention to detail. Certainly, my old job when I was down in Kilmarnock, 9 times out of 10, especially with the Nike strips, whatever one Kelly were wearing, you could probably go on the Nike website and buy, a plain version of it, because it was just off the rack. So reading what the owners of Castore had to say suggests to me that this is going to be a good partnership for us, and the kit will be of the best quality possible, and I think that's all you can ask really. And financially, it seemed like a good deal. And let's just hope that everything's above board and we're not going to see a return from Mike Ashley.
Before we move on, what's the problem with Reebok?
Well, the last.
Do they even exist?
No, the last football strip I remember being Reebok was the one that Liverpool won the Champions League in 2005. Is that not right?
To be honest, David, I'm more of a Dolce and Gabbana guy, so I don't tend to thought about sportswear brands.
Okay, no, carry on. I think we've said enough about Reebok.
The one thing I would say about Castore is that they're obviously a relatively new brand, and they really want to make a mark, and they want to get into football in a big way. So it's in as much in their interest to make a really good job of this deal with us as it is for Rangers to get a good benefit from it. So you would hope that they will put everything into it, and my only concern is that them being a smaller company, I suppose, is that they overstretch themselves one way or the other. So we have to just hope that that's something that's been factored in, and that they've got the money to back up what they're planning and doing as well. I wouldn't like to see them, with it being a fairly small startup company, or not startup, but fairly youthful company, that they don't have the resources to back them up. You would think that going into this deal, they must have that in place, but we've seen things happen before.
Well, I think that's a very important point, and that's what, particularly the Nike, Adidas brigade of fans that are upset about this deal are saying, well, Hummel couldn't meet the demand in the first couple of months, and there was huge delays on everyone getting their strips, and Castore will just be the same. And that's, I think that is a legitimate concern, particularly if you want to go down the Celtic fan investigation route of looking up the warehouses and looking up the registered office on Google Maps and that kind of thing. Then fine, you might come to that conclusion that they'll struggle to have that the ability to meet the demand that Rangers fans are undoubtedly going to supply, because as one of the co-founders of the company said on his interview with James Bisgrove this morning, was back in the 1990s, Rangers were the biggest selling football strip in the UK, above Man United, above Arsenal, above Celtic, of course. But I think you're absolutely right, Ian, that they will not enter into this without having the resources and the capability to fulfill the demand. And I think they're in a fairly fortunate position, because they can see the likes of Hummel and they can see the mistakes that they've made, and Rangers can kind of feed in and give them that education. And the guy, actually, if anyone's not seen that interview where it was him and James Bisgrove, the commercial director at Rangers, being interviewed this morning via video link, he's saying all the right things, that, as you say, Ian, they want to make themselves a global leader in football kit manufacturing and sportswear. They want to disrupt the market, which is dominated by American and German brands, and that they were looking for one key partner. So they're not, Hummel's downfall in a lot of ways was the fact that they service like 25 other clubs who, perhaps aren't massive in the UK, but certainly in other countries. In Denmark, they produce kits for the biggest clubs. A number of big clubs across Europe have their kits produced by Hummel, and that was part of their downfall, was that they couldn't cope not just with the Rangers demand, but the demand spread everywhere. So Castore have done this in quite a clever way, that they're picking one key partner. It boosts their visibility because of the number that they'll shift. And if they can fulfill that and produce to a high quality, then it all sounds pretty positive. David, how about yourself? Do you have concerns around the fulfillment of the demand side of things and that production chain?
It was something that crossed my mind, but again, after reading the thoughts of the owner, they've been preparing for 12 months for this, move into football and producing new prototypes for, fabrics and all that kind of thing. So it seemed that, listen, we can only take it at face value what they're saying as a company, and from what I've seen, there's been nothing to suggest, anything negative at the moment. I'm quite satisfied that they're in the right position, and what they're also trying to do is Rangers will be the first club, and then they'll look at a Premier League club down south, and then I think a club in Portugal, and that's the way they've set out their map, in football, and that's the difference between Hummel and Castore for me is Hummel were probably a company which were really successful in terms of football for a few years, 20, 30 years ago, World Cups and etc. And they're sort of coming back now, and they're becoming a bit more mainstream again. Difference with that and Castore are a startup essentially, and we're the first club who will benefit from their enthusiasm and designs, and I think that's exciting for Rangers as a club, to be chosen as that first club to venture into football with. I think that's got to be a positive thing, and I think again financially it seems to be positive, and I mean there may be teething issues, but I think the company have prepared well, certainly from reading about it. And I don't think they'll be coming into this, with any naivety. I think they'll be well prepared for dealing with what's about to come.
I think the other thing as well is, I mean, if you just look around the world at the moment, we're in strange times, so there could quite easily be issues about supply that are not necessarily issues to do with the company. They're just general issues that everyone's having in the manufacturing sector. So, if things go less than smoothly at the outset, I just hope that everyone doesn't just go berserk and do the usual overreaction, because perhaps it's not necessarily the fact that it's this particular company. It's just that there will be issues, and we just have to deal with it. And even if there are issues relating to them, then if they deal with them properly, because we've had issues with going back 20, 30 years with strips for various reasons, things going wrong with them. So these things happen, and it doesn't mean to say that it's anything wrong with the deal or the company we've teamed up with. It just means that sometimes things go wrong. So hopefully there won't be an overreaction. Man, that's probably a naive thought, but there you go.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, though. Actually, that it's a slightly unique time for something like this to be launched, and it does place large demand on even the basic infrastructure like postal services to get your kits to you, or get your kits from the warehouse to the distribution centres, or whatever it might be. Maybe in that regard, they're being a wee bit clever in that they're going to be launching this to My Gers members first. Obviously, quite a shrewd move from the club as well, so that people will rush out and pay 50 quid for a My Gers membership so they can be the first ones to have the tops. It's all business at the end of the day, and the club needs to be making money at a time like this. I think what we're kind of all saying is that the guys are saying the right things, that they've thought about this, that they want, even things like if they're saying they're a luxury brand, they're a high quality premium brand, so they will be making the strips from a finer quality of material, but they realise that pricing is an emotive issue in football merchandise, so the price won't vary from standard. So they're saying all the right things. And just before we came on air, we were having a wee chat about the Mike Ashley question. So the fact that everyone sort of seems to be dancing around quite subtly the Mike Ashley issue, and we're talking about how every piece of merchandise sold will directly profit and benefit Rangers, and it's the most lucrative deal we've entered into for a number of years, plus the fact that Castore are going to be doing up, have invested to do up the Rangers megastore at Ibrox. All of this suggests that a certain Mike Ashley is out of the picture. Ian, do you sort of take these signals the same way as me? And if so, what could that mean for the commercial viability of the club going forward if he's really gone?
Well, I mean, all the evidence would point towards it being the case. I mean, I think we also were discussing how you can't really second guess anything that Mike Ashley might do. You don't know, whether he might just pop up again when he's least expected. Having said that, everything sounds fairly positive in that front, and I think it's vital, that Sports Direct are out of the picture, not just commercially, but just as for the message it sends, that it's almost the last sort of remnant of the last sort of 8 or 9 years that we can finally draw a line under it and move on, because that's always been sort of hanging around in the background of as the one sort of last thing that we really needed to rid ourselves of. So if he is gone, and it sounds like he might be, or it sounds like he probably is, then that's really good news. Commercially, obviously, because it means that the money's going into Rangers, but more just for the very fact that he's out of the picture, and he's been one of the biggest drains on the club, and one of the things that's really dragged us down over the years. So fingers crossed, but it does sound that way.
It certainly does, and you're right that he's been a drain on Rangers in terms of finances, in terms of manpower, just to deal with this guy through courts. If he really is gone, then fantastic. But I noticed that the club isn't kind of directly addressing that, and it was similar 2 years ago with Hummel. We all sort of thought he was out of the picture, and then a couple of weeks down the line, we're back in court because he's matched bids and all sorts. So it's always a difficult question. I understand why the club isn't coming out and saying, right, this is how much money we're getting from the sale of each strip. Sports directors out of the equation, and away we go. David, do you think that could have a potential knock-on impact in terms of sales figures? Do you think if the club was to come out and unequivocally say there is no more influence from Mike Ashley, would that drive up sales even further? Or do you think by this point the fans are willing now to part with their cash and buy these strips regardless of Mike Ashley's influence?
Well, I've seen there's been no real, suggestion that fans believe he is still, in action. I've not seen a great deal of that, so I don't think it would have a major effect on the actual sales of strips. But as you say, it's slightly worrying that that there hasn't been a complete indication that he is definitely gone, because it has been such a black cloud over the club for so many years. But if there must be some form of legal issue there, or I think they're maybe trying to avoid what happened with the Hummel fiasco as well. And I think it's just been such a long road where we've thought we've won or whatever, or got rid of him, and then he's managed to come back, and it's ended up costing the club a lot of money. So I think they would really want to get their ducks in a row before making any real statements on it.
I tell you that the one thing that worries me slightly about it is that I think I'm right in saying he's very, very close to selling Newcastle now. So he's the kind of guy who will turn up for a fight just because he wants a fight. And if he's now no longer got Newcastle on his hands, he's certainly got a wee bit more time to be playing with, and maybe he just fancies being more of an arsehole to Rangers Football Club. I hope not. All the signs are pointing to this kind of being the end of the road for Ashley at Rangers. So certainly fingers crossed that's where we are. David, last question on the Castore deal. Obviously, we don't know the strip look or anything at this point. We know that there's going to be, from what they said this morning, a lot of limited edition stuff, a lot of training gear produced, a lot of special merchandise for the fans to wear. Also, bespoke and kind of differentiated kits for the women's team, for the youth teams. So it seems we're getting a very, very comprehensive package. And some of the figures that we're seeing banded around, something like £25 million deal over the next 5 years, it certainly seems very commercially appetizing, let's say, to a club that's struggled for revenue generation. How impressed have you been with the work that's been done by James Bisgrove, the commercial director, who's set up links obviously now with Castore in terms of a very profitable sponsor, Rita kit manufacturing deal, but also the links that he's set up with other clubs globally, certain other commercial partners that he's brought in. It seems like he's doing a good job. How do you kind of mark his report card a year into his tenure?
Yeah, I think he's done well. I think we've needed someone like that for a long time, because we've sold ourselves painfully short over the past few years in terms of sponsorship, kit deals, obviously, and just the overall feeling around the club in terms of the amount of money we're making from things other than ticket sales. So yeah, I think that's another example of thinking outside the box, and that's what we need. We need someone that's not just going to go with what a safe option, and I think he's shown, obviously, well, especially with this Castore deal, that he can think outside the box, and with someone like that at the helm, And hopefully a year from now we'll see the same thing about the new press guy as well. And the difference that he's made. I think it's just off the pitch has needed a big overhaul the past few years, and I think there's been a few people in the wrong positions. And hopefully, Bisgrove has done a good job by all accounts so far. We'll find out soon how the new press guy gets on. But yeah, the signs are that we're moving forward off the pitch, and that can only be seen as a positive thing.
Certainly, and you can make an argument that actually some of the most important signings that have been made by Rangers have been off the pitch positions. So I think it's a really good example with the PR guy as well. The communications over probably the most testing period for Rangers in the last half dozen years. With the whole SPFL fiasco, the communications have been spot on for most of the fans. So I think he's proved himself with a bit of a baptism of fire there. I'm going to slightly throw you in at the deep end, David. Obviously, we've shaped up on the commercial side and on the communications side, and you mentioned there's maybe a few positions that needed to change at Rangers behind the scenes. Can you think of any more areas now that we need to be tightening up off the pitch?
I do wonder about a chief executive coming in. We've obviously got Stuart Robertson as managing director. I'm just not sure long term he is perhaps going to be the best man for the job. I think he's done a good job, but I think moving forward in terms of that role, I think we possibly need someone that's just got a bigger reach and a more sort of, I don't know, someone that's just maybe a wee bit more savvy. I think there's a place for Stuart Robertson at the club, 100%. And I think he genuinely has been a good ambassador for Rangers. I think we could do with someone, just having that bit more nous in that sort of role. I think it's important. You see the way other clubs, chief executives and things like that operate, and I think we just need someone at a more elite level, perhaps. But that's maybe one for the medium to long term, I think. But certainly, from my point of view, I think that role itself could perhaps benefit from someone who is maybe more experienced in a proper chief executive role. I know we've discussed it in the past, but that's nothing really against Stuart Robertson. I think, as I say, I don't see that being an immediate thing. But yeah, I think in terms of executives at the club, maybe we could do a bit more experience and sort of know-how at that level.
I don't think that's an unfair comment at all. But like you, I'm very, very happy to see the progress that's being made in sort of key positions. I think back to how crippled this club has been on the commercial side, thanks to deals signed by folk like Brian Stockbridge and the lasting impact and legacy that's had. So to see all that getting tidied up is very, very welcome indeed. Right, I think we've probably spent enough time talking about Castore and the new kits, which is difficult because we've not even seen what these kits look like, and obviously we're placing a lot of faith in them. Of course, this week again has been another tough week to be a Rangers fan in terms of the off-the-park shenanigans around the SPFL and the kind of haunted hallways of Hampden. Ian, we're at the point now where back on Tuesday we had the EGM that was called by Rangers on the basis of looking for an independent investigation into the handling of the votes to tie up the lower league seasons and then pave the way for the SPFL Premiership to be called early as well. Obviously, Rangers failed to secure enough votes to force that independent investigation. There was a qualified majority that they would need. And it was spun as Rangers failed to meet their target. Rangers didn't get it over the line. Rangers didn't do enough. It was kind of phrased as a bit of a defeat for Rangers. From your perspective, was Tuesday a failure for the club?
Well, I suppose in the sense that they didn't get what they were wanting to get through across the line, then I suppose you could treat it as a failure. But I don't think anyone really realistically thought that was going to happen in the first place. I don't think there was ever any chance that, was it 75% or something like that they had to get, whatever the majority was that they had to get. I don't think there was ever any chance of that happening. The figures I think if you sort of analyse them, sort of, they're a little bit closer than you would look at in the first instance, given that 6 of the no voters were on the SPFL board, so they're obviously going to vote the way they voted. So I mean, I think this was probably more of a shot across the bows, perhaps in some ways, that and it's a longer game that Rangers are having to play here. Rather, if they want genuine regime change at the SPFL, then it was never going to happen overnight. That was never going to be the case. I think what has got to happen now from the Rangers' perspective is, and it was maybe touched on this a moment ago, is they have to be more savvy in terms of how they work politically with a small p, and try and get more of the clubs in the league set up on their side, and that's got to be done probably behind the scenes rather than through the pages of the newspapers. But I think it was a failure because they didn't get what they wanted to achieve, but I don't think anyone really expected it. So it's all a question that this is maybe the first sort of stage in what is going to be a slightly longer fight, really, I think. And we'll have to see how that develops in the coming weeks and months.
That's quite an interesting point you make there, Ian, about trying to turn other clubs to Rangers' point of view. I mean, practically speaking, how do you think that they can manage to do that when essentially they're trying to convince clubs to rail against the establishment, and the establishment has already proven that they're willing to deceive and lie to member clubs, as regards you won't get your money unless you toe the party line, and obviously sat behind that you've got Lawwell orchestrating the whole thing. How is it that Rangers can actually entice these clubs on side?
Well, it's about shining a light on it, isn't it? Really, more than anything, because the clubs are obviously in the short term probably going to take what's on offer for them. But the very fact that this whole thing's been exposed the way it has, and sort of shown the machinations that are going on, is going to be, for some of these clubs, I'm sure, a bit of an eye-opener, to be honest. I think maybe some of them just sort of go along with it and just quite happy with the way things are going. But they might then, having seen what's happened and seen how it's played out, start thinking twice next time a situation arises where they might start thinking, well, what's the motivation here for this? Why is this happening? And at that point, they may think back to what was going on before and start thinking that perhaps they shouldn't just be quite so blind in their faith and their leaders. But at the same time, it has to be, in years, and understandably, Rangers have been quite abrasive in the way they've been dealing with other clubs, and a lot of that relates back to the way Rangers were treated by the other clubs in the last decade. So, I think while the sort of motivation is there to stick it up them in some ways, we have to be cleverer than that, and we have to start sort of making alliances and start talking to these other clubs that perhaps that we wouldn't have done in the past. And I think teams like clubs like Aberdeen, they're probably the third biggest club in Scotland, I suppose, and they voted alongside Rangers. So if you look at the teams that voted Rangers' way, they take up a large percentage of the supporters in Scotland. So we're not 100 miles behind in that sense.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's, in a way, it's kind of frustrating, or it's a wee bit of a shame that Rangers come all the way up through from League Two back up to the Premier League, and we didn't obviously manage to form these alliances in a strong enough way. Obviously, with some clubs that that bond is there, and we did manage to shine the light and get certain clubs on side, but maybe there's a slight opportunity missed. Of course, the club was in such a terrible state whilst we were going through the majority of that journey that the charlatans behind the scenes probably weren't too focused on making friendships for the benefit of the game.
I don't think they were interested, were they? I mean, they had no interest in making those alliances at all. So they weren't thinking about the bigger picture, because the bigger picture didn't interest them. So so that you're right, a completely missed opportunity. We should be. I mean, because of Rangers, a lot of these clubs are still in existence, probably because the money that went into the clubs through Rangers fans going to their grounds and buying tickets and all the rest of it probably kept a lot of them in business, or kept them able to survive and spend money that they wouldn't otherwise have been able to do. So they should in theory be really grateful to Rangers as a club and a fan base. So there's clearly a missed opportunity there. But
certainly is. David, we're in a position now where it's widely reported in the media. Actually, it looked like the title was handed to Celtic back on Friday. We're now being told that the title will be handed to Celtic in the coming days this week. It looks like it's an absolute formality now. To me, this is embarrassing for the SPFL, who are saying we have to call the league now. We have to get this over and done with. There's no chance of us playing football again anytime soon and restarting the season. It's embarrassing for them to say that the same weekend that the German football has just played an entire calendar of games. But hey ho, that's where we are. Why are the SPFL in such a hurry to declare Celtic the winners of the 2019-2020 season, when surely there is logic in waiting and trying to restart the season?
I think that's, the $1 million question in many ways, and whether we actually get any clarity on, what's actually going on over the past, couple of months. I very much doubt we'll get that. I mean, the thing about Celtic being given the title has sort of become it was very much a byproduct of weeks and weeks of arguments and fights. And now it's probably going to happen. I mean, to me, it's it is what it is. If no one could have predicted what's happened, and they were the runaway leaders. There's no denying that. But yeah, it does seem quite strange that there's so many mixed messages coming out, because I'm sure the chairman of the SPFL said through the week that we had to do everything we could to finish the season. So I don't really know who's running things in there. Well, I think we all have our suspicions, but even the communications aspect of it. I mean, they're just still shooting from the hip. Everyone's saying different things on that SPFL board, so it's really hard to keep up with it all. But yeah, I mean, it felt like a formality that was going to happen as soon as this all kicked off in the first place. So it's no surprise to me. Do I agree with it? No, but there's not much you can do, especially when Rangers have even it was evident the other day. The EGM and the votes, the way the voting had gone. So we don't have the majority of people in our favour at the moment, unfortunately. And that's disappointing, but I think we're just going to have to accept that this board, the SPFL, are going to make certain decisions, unfortunately, and whether we agree with it or not, it's inconsequential at this stage.
It's such a curious thing, when German football, one of the elite leagues in world football, is able to start up again. And actually, we'll come on in a few minutes, sort of discuss the rights and the wrongs of that. But German football, French football heading back towards training. Spanish football back in training. English football looking at this whole Project Restart stuff. Leagues are making moves to get themselves underway again, obviously in a safe and secure manner. And like I say, we can debate the merits of that as we go. But for the SPFL to be in such a hurry, such a concrete, we have to call this now. You have to get the vote done now. I know you're meant to have 25 days to give us your vote, but you have to give us your vote by Friday. And to get it all wrapped up and hand the title to Celtic, who were going to win the league anyway. That's the curious thing. I said it last week on the show. I'm saying it again this week. I don't understand why Celtic are not pushing as hard as possible to get the season restarted. Win it on the park, and there will be no asterisk, there will be no questions, and you'll have deserved to have won it. Why would you push so hard to be awarded it when you could win it outright? It doesn't make sense to me, but that's where we are. Ian, you kind of alluded earlier to building allegiances and alliances with other clubs. If you were in charge of Rangers now, you know, the dossier was presented, the EGM was held, and we don't have the votes for the investigation. What would be your next move? We have a lot of fans talking about taking this the judicial route, taking it to UEFA, taking it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. You have a lot of fans pushing to kick your feet and stomp and try and get a move to England. What would you do if you were in charge of the club?
Well, there's a question. I mean, to be honest, you would have to say, I mean, I don't know what the legal options that would be open to Rangers would be, and how successful they would be likely to be. The danger, I would say, is that Rangers are going to potentially be painted as the bad guys. I mean, we already have been. There's already been plenty of people saying, all this, the reaction from Rangers has put clubs at risk and could have put funding at risk, etc. Unless you're 100% certain that you're going to succeed, and who is ever 100% certain in these cases, then I don't see how they can go down that line of taking it any further. Whether UEFA would want to step in or not, I don't know. But I mean, I haven't seen any suggestion that they would, and I haven't seen any suggestion that they would step in other leagues where similar decisions have been taken. So, while the whole situation just sticks in the throat, it's I think Rangers' options at the moment are limited. It's a longer term game they've got to play. Really, in some extent, they've just got to say, what's done is done, and let's see how we can make sure that in the future, if the situation was somehow to arise again or something similar, then it wouldn't pan out the same way. But I think digging in and getting embroiled in what potentially could be quite expensive and potentially quite damaging legal action or complaints, I don't know if that's the right way to go, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's how I feel about it.
David, how about yourself? What would you do? What's your take on the potential legal routes?
I don't. I mean, I think Ian summed up the best way it possibly could. I really don't know what the next steps are. I think it's quite difficult, and that vote the other day did stick in my craw a wee bit. It's just quite frustrating. It feels a bit sort of desperate at the moment. And you just feel like even with a absolute cock up like that SPFL vote, you still can't get any investigation into how it happened, what conversations took place between clubs during that period. Why, because I keep saying it, Rangers were the ones pushing for the investigation, but what about Hearts? Partick Thistle. They're staring down the barrel of a gun at the moment, all because of this, this vote, which in many ways was extremely dodgy, and we've covered it well in this podcast in recent weeks. But it did feel just a bit, depressing the other day when you realise that no, we weren't actually going to have any independent investigation. And the only investigation into the full process was one that was carried out by the SPFL themselves, who said, "Oh, surprise, surprise, there was nothing wrong." That's a concern for me, and I hope over the next few months we get some form of clarity on exactly what's going on at SPFL at the moment.
To some extent, I mean, the bigger picture, this is something that Rangers are pushing heavily because they feel that the SPFL is not fit for purpose. On the very specific issues about what's been happening, it's not really Rangers' fight in some ways. The people that are, and obviously the league title is at stake in some ways, but the clubs that are going to really be affected are the ones that you just mentioned, the Hearts, the Partick Thistle. It's their fight, and they should be the ones, if anyone is going to be taking it further in terms of stopping the process happening, it should be down to them. Partick Thistle were very bullish initially in saying that they had legal advice and that they felt that they had ways that they could stop it, and then they backtracked on that, partly because they said they didn't want to have a negative impact on other clubs, but also you wonder what discussions might have been happening behind the scenes that made them think, well, maybe if we just keep quiet, then a bit of league reconstruction will happen and we'll be fine. But they're the ones that are directly going to be affected by it. So while it's it's annoying for Rangers and we're as Rangers fans angry with the way things have panned out, I would have thought that the fans of these other clubs should be the ones that are really angry about it and should be really pushing to see what can be done to stop it. But I mean, I don't know if they've got the resources or the will to do it or what. But the onus should be really on them on this very specific issue.
I think the question of resources is probably an important point there, and also the question of profile. If Partick Thistle wanted to, or say Stranraer, for example, Stranraer get relegated from League One down to League Two. If Stranraer want to, kind of lead this charge of taking down the SPFL with an independent investigation or take it to court, they're not making Sky Sports News. They're not making the BBC. Rangers have the profile to have some weight and some significance in this. So I think if it hadn't been Rangers, it was nobody. And that's the frustrating thing, is that even though we don't really stand to gain anything other than, the gains that everyone would make in terms of fair, impartial clarity and just proper governance of our game, it's not like we were saying, don't give them the title, give it to us.
Exactly.
It's just a case of let's clean up this mess. And yet still, clubs would rather have the mess, or clubs are told they'd rather have the mess because that's the only way they can get their money. That's the really, really difficult part to swallow. Now, Ian, the SPFL over the last week, or since Tuesday anyway, have kind of, to me, it looks like they've been maybe sort of trying to extend a bit of an olive branch to Rangers, saying, look, we need to come together, we need to work together for the benefit of the Scottish game. What kind of working relationship, if this is the end of the line for this whole saga, Celtic get awarded the title and we just kick off a new season whenever we can, what kind of working relationship can we have with the SPFL going forward?
Well, I mean, on the surface of it, I don't think they can have much of a working relationship at all. I mean, I think it's gone beyond the stage of olive branches. I mean, Rangers have effectively, not directly, but have effectively called into question not so much called into question the governance of the league. They've definitely questioned that, but there's been suggestions of dodgy goings on, and I don't see how the SPFL could sort of work with that. Vice versa, the way the SPFL and Doncaster in particular has responded, and the chairman, they have basically burned bridges as well. So I mean, I think there's a basic breakdown in the whole relationship. They've obviously got to have to work together in the sort of basic sense of just getting on with playing games and etc. But I don't think there's much chance of them working closely and having any friendly chinwags. I think Rangers have to, if Rangers want to do that, as we said before, then they have to do that another route. And if they want to change things, then that has to be done with the backing of other clubs. We'll see how that pans out.
See, I completely agree with that. I don't know how we can have a constructive relationship with the governing body going forward, which obviously, is a massive exclamation mark to me. David, do you fear that maybe this whole episode and Rangers kind of leading this charge against the SPFL could have negative repercussions for us down the line? Do you think that, kind of the scorched earth policy that we seem to have had here could actually impact on us in a negative way going forward?
I don't really see how much more negative. I can't see how any more negativity could actually come to us in terms of the governing bodies. Like, is it possible for us to be given a worse deal than the one we've currently got? I'm not so sure. It would just be quite nice to see an end to this in some way. But I don't think the end is in sight. I think this could rumble on for a long, long time.
Yeah, sadly, I suspect you're right, and I don't know what the next few weeks will hold. The suggestion, the kind of, I don't know, the subtext of a lot of the statements from Rangers or the communications from Rangers seem to suggest that we're not just going to let it lie where it is. And I'd be really, really surprised if we don't see something from the club over the coming weeks. I just feel like, they'll probably take it a little bit further, whether that's to the SFA, to UEFA, through the courts. I don't know. And I think everyone kind of knows my opinion, that if there was ever a time to be pushing to move to England, it's surely now. Not least because that means a few more local games for me.
Absolutely, I'm all in favour of that as well. But I mean, I just don't see that. I just can't see how that could possibly happen. I mean, we'd be talking about, I suppose, starting again you've probably had this discussion before, but we'd be talking about starting at the bottom of the pile again, and I don't think there would be an appetite for that again to sort of work our way up through the leagues.
There's pros and cons to it. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know. To me, I'd rather be playing. If we, let's say, fine, we start at the bottom of the pile. I'd rather be playing Blythe Spartans than have to go and play against Mike Mulroney's Alloa ever again. It's not an easy thing. But
I agree in principle, but and I think maybe 8 years ago, I was all for it. To be quite honest, I think when we were put it into the lower leagues previously, my feelings were we should have done what we could have done then, but I don't know now.
I think the issue with that as well is, maybe in Scotland when we did that, it was only a matter of time before we get back up, to the Premier League. There's no guarantees. It could be 15, 20, 25 years before we were in the Premier League in England. And I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think in terms of finances down there, most Championship clubs will probably get bigger budgets than us. It'd be a long, long slog, and I just don't know. I don't know if it's feasible to start, in the very bottom tier, because remember, these are hard leagues that you're going through. It's not like going and playing a part-time team, in Northern Scotland. This would be a lot harder, and I just think, at this time, and as Ian says, maybe the time to do it was when we went down the first time. But also, did we miss our chance at going to the Premier League if that was ever an option? When we were really at the top of our game, maybe 20, 25 years ago.
Maybe now's not the time for this conversation, but my biggest gripe, I suppose, not my biggest gripe. There's obviously been worse things happen since, but with David Murray was that we didn't have the ambition or the foresight to get into the Premier League in 1993 or whenever it was it started, because that was the opportunity. We were the biggest club in Britain at that time, bigger than any other club in England and better than any other club in England at that stage. We had the best team, the biggest fan base and best commercial operations. That was the time we should have been in the Premier League, and I think we put all our eggs in the European League basket at that time, which was understandable, but I don't think anyone really understood how the Premier League was going to take off. But that was a real missed opportunity, 25 years ago, and that I don't think we would, if we'd gone then, and I think we would have gone on our own. I don't think necessarily Celtic, who were on their knees at that stage, would have gone as well. I think we would have, never looked back, basically. But that's another day.
You see, I absolutely hear what you're both saying, about the slog that it would be and the no guarantees, and we could be, sort of banishing ourselves to a lifetime of obscurity in League One, very, very possibly. What I would fear is that, we're talking now, we look back at 1991 and we should have gone then, and we look at 2012 and we should have gone then. 10 years' time, do we look back at 2020 and say, Christ, what a shit show that was? We should have done everything to get away from them. I don't know. Listen, with 5 minutes to go, it's something that I'd be keen to discuss with you guys. It's something we've alluded to earlier this evening, is football's kind of starting to start itself back up again. Obviously, I've watched 4 German football games this weekend. It's been wonderful just to have some live sport back to watch. It's great. England, with their Project Restart, looking at getting the clubs back in training and having safe ways of starting the season up again. Spanish teams back in training at the moment as well. It seems like there's a real move towards getting these leagues up and running again everywhere, apart from Scotland, who are going to delay this as long as possible to make it look like it was necessary to cancel the season. David, in your opinion, is it right for us to be bringing back football at a time when there's still so much uncertainty, when Germany itself seems to have eased some lockdown restrictions and actually be suffering from a bit of a second wave of this pandemic? When there's still so much unknown, is it maybe wrong for us to be expecting footballers to go back to work?
I think there's probably something in that. It's difficult to really comprehend football when you look at the bigger picture of this current pandemic. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's cynical on my part, but I think a lot of it is to do with the repercussions of not restarting for a lot of these big leagues that have got massive television deals. And what could happen if the season doesn't start again? And you've got to. It's a fine line between starting to bring football back to give the country a boost or whatever it is they're billing it as, and then risking the health of players, staff, media. So yeah, I mean, personally, in the current situation, yes, it's good for people to be able to watch a bit of live sport, but I mean, for me, if in terms of Project Restart, I think in this country, I think we're a bit still a bit away from that, and but I think the way the UK government seems to be approaching things at the moment, I won't be surprised when it does return, and I think there's a chance that it will return too early and it will have repercussions, and that concerns me. I think that there's just too much going on at the moment, and football should be the last thing in anyone's mind. And yeah, that's sort of where I stand on it. Yeah, good for everyone to watch a bit of live football, but it's certainly not the biggest thing going on at the moment.
You see, I agree with you, David. I just think it's maybe too soon, and it's not quite right when we're all still being told to stay home, and everyone's putting in such an effort to try and contain this thing and stay healthy, to expect players on a human level to go back to work in a contact sport, in a physical contact environment. It just doesn't seem safe, and it almost seems selfish for folk like me to be sat at home watching it. Ian, yourself, we've had football come back this weekend, but it looks to me that England is going to be pushing to get restarted as quickly as possible. If that happens, do you think that puts pressure on the SPFL and the SFA to start up Scottish football again, rather than handing the title over to Celtic? Or do you think that Scotland will kind of continue to do its own thing in that regard?
I think they'll do their own thing, to be quite honest. I think that's probably part of the reason why, as you were saying earlier, why are they trying to push it through so quickly? Well, that's possibly part of the reason why, because if they see that other leagues on our doorstep are starting, then it sort of does put pressure on in Scotland, and maybe that's the sort of pressure they don't want to take. But I mean, I agree that it was great. I watched the football yesterday, and it was great to see the games back. A bit weird, but I'm not comfortable with it happening at the moment. Certainly not in the UK, and especially in the situation in Scotland, where things are a few weeks behind in terms of the general sort of easing of lockdown. I think it's even further away in Scotland than it would be in England. So I just don't see. I wouldn't be. It will happen in England, but I just don't think it should. But in the short term, and I think in the implications for Scotland are that it will be done and dusted long before that ever comes to be an issue.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the SPFL's way of approaching this. Let's get this all wrapped up before England restarts, so that we don't have to have that awkward scenario of England restarting, but us deciding to call the season anyway. That maybe it's cynical, but that's how this whole thing reads to me.
What I would say is, the way it's been handled in Scotland and possibly elsewhere as well, I don't know, but the way it's been handled in Scotland is as shambolic as you would expect. But it's not. I have some degree of sympathy with the way all the administrators around the world have to deal with these things, because what is the right thing to do? Is it right to call it, or is it right to try and hang on as long as you can? I don't know. It's a difficult one. And the finances are important as well, because the longer it goes on without any games, the more struggles there's going to be for the clubs to survive. So it's not easy, but in typical Scottish style, they've made a bit of a dog's breakfast, the whole thing, but we've come to expect that.
Yeah, they have, and I think they've done that because they rushed into it. Personally, to me, the most important thing is that people are safe, and putting folk back into a football environment at the moment, even at the player level, because the football doesn't operate in a vacuum. There's backroom staff, there's physios, medics, trainers, coaches, media, club executives, all of these people milling around, and then the players get out on the pitch and they jostle each other and they shout at each other, they're sweating, they're spitting. It just doesn't feel safe, considering the environment that we're all living through at the moment. So for me, great to have it back. Loved sitting down and watching it all. Never realised how much I cared about clubs like Freiburg and Paderborn, but still probably not quite the right thing to do. Listen, gents, I'm conscious that we've just tipped over the hour there, so I think it's probably about time that we call it a day. I want to say a massive thank you, of course, to Ian and to David for giving up their time this evening and joining us on the show. It's incredible that despite the void of Scottish football action, there's still a lot of Scottish football stuff to talk about. So very grateful for them joining me this evening. Thank you as well to everyone who's listened and who's chipped in with comments and questions, and who's subscribed, who's liked the show, who's left us a comment. It really is very much appreciated. The show will be back next week. I'm sure there will be plenty more to talk about. So please do join us for that same time, same place next week. That's Sunday 9:30 on YouTube, or any time after that from wherever you get your podcast from. Please do check out the website as well if you've not done so already, for all the news, reviews, match previews, not so many of them at the moment, as well as the friendly discussion forum. That's www.gersnet.co.uk. Until next time, please do stay safe. Please do look after yourself. Please do look after any key workers. Just look after everyone and make sure that you're not doing anything silly or anything dangerous. It's such an incredible time for us all. Please do stay safe wherever you can. Until next time, thank you very, very much for joining us, and have a great week.